Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Thanks for that, Joe. My mic was apparently muted. So, welcome to the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we hope you prevail today in Week 12 and the rest of the 2024 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me normally is my co-host, Nick Cap. He's a little bit under the weather today. Just can't speak, and to be on the show, you kind of have to be able to speak. So that's how it goes sometimes. Wish him the best. I kind of want to blame the Jets on this one with all the disappointment they've been putting Nick through this season. The Jets have definitely taken a toll on Nick, but wishing him a speedy recovery for sure. So I'll be here to answer all of your fantasy football questions over the next hour or so. I'm not under the weather per se, but I was at Billy Joel last night. I walked in my door at 2 a.m. I was up at 6. So I am running on a lower gas tank, but that's okay. I'm here to answer all of your fantasy football questions. So like we do every week, jump in the chat, ask those questions, and we will get them answered. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast live show. We do a live show every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, and then give you 2 shows during the week available on Tuesdays and Fridays. The Tuesday and Friday shows are pre-recorded. They are available on our YouTube channel and our audio streaming platform. So if you'd like to support the show and listen in any way you can, whether it's audio or video, go to our YouTube channel or our audio streaming platforms. I will answer any questions during the next hour or so. Start, sit, lineup decisions. If you still have a trade deadline, your trade questions, Thanksgiving's coming up. So I would assume that your trade deadline is passed, but just in case it hasn't, I will answer all those questions as well. When I don't have questions, I'm going to go over to the injury tracker that we do use and go game by game and talk about injuries, maybe something that I'm looking for in each game, maybe something that I'm excited for. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about my personal fantasy football teams. I personally have suffered a ton of injuries throughout my leagues and bye weeks. There's one league where I have Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Bijan Robinson on bye. And then there's also Devontae Smith, who's gotten hurt. So that's going to be a tough one to win. There's another league of mine that I also have Burrow and somebody else is on bye for me. So a lot of bye weeks, a lot of players out, and a lot of nagging injuries. So I do have a couple injury reports that I could pull up. Fantasy Life did send one out recently. So I'll read off a couple of these little injury updates here off the Fantasy Life app. Giants wide receiver Malik Nabers is expected to play with a groin injury. It's a 1:00 game, I believe. The Bears are confident that both running back DeAndre Swift with a groin and Keenan Allen with an ankle will play today. Both are listed as questionable. The 49ers believe that Brock Purdy should be able to return next Sunday at Buffalo despite the shoulder soreness. The interesting thing about Purdy is I didn't even know about the injury until yesterday. So that was interesting. 49ers are optimistic that Trent Williams, who's listed as questionable for Sunday's game with an ankle injury, will be able to play. That'd be huge for quarterback Brandon Allen. Panthers running back Jonathan Brooks with a knee is slated to make his season debut today against the Chiefs. That's a very tough matchup. He's going to be on a pitch count, and I spoke about on Friday show how tough of a matchup it is with the all boom and all bust teams. I did have the Panthers running backs on the all bust team. Adam Thielen with a hamstring is going to play. I don't think we've gotten one Adam Thielen question on the show this season. Seahawks tight end Noah Fant is listed as questionable with a groin injury, but is good to go. Patriots, no, it's not. This is a defensive player. I'm looking for anybody else on offense. The Ravens and the Vikings will be looking to add Daniel Jones. I don't know why the Ravens with Lamar, but all right, got some questions in the chat. Let's talk about some questions here. First one we have is Cap for Life. Hey, bro, just traded Dobbins and Anthony Richardson for JSN and Bo Nix. that's a pretty good trade, I think. I mean, Dobbins is probably he had a good game last week. So I don't want to say he's on the decline, but they did start using the Gus bus a little bit last week. And And Bo Nix has been great. He's been really good. We spoke about that on Friday's show. Bo Nix is actually on my all boom team this week, so I would get Bo Nix in your lineup. He says I need 2 out of 4: Amir Abdullah, Jalen McMillan, Tank Dell, or Luke Shoemaker. I would want to get Dell in there, probably just because he has the highest upside. I am worried about Dell, though. I do have Dell in my all bust team. I don't really like any of the matchups. I definitely don't want to play Shoemaker. Don't want to play a Cowboy, and definitely don't want to play. I don't want to play a Cowboy, so I would get him out of there. I don't see any upside with Abdullah. I would go at Dell and McMillan for the upside and the talent, but both of those do concern me a bit, I will say. From the Sean says, what's up? This week is rough, man. Yes, it is a rough week. Yeah. He does have a picture with the wise man in his YouTube picture. So we do love the wise man and the OTC on this show. From Rome the host, Josh Downs, Juwan Jennings, Ladd McConkey, Adam Thielen, Austin Eckler need to start 3. Is this PPR? I need to know if this is PPR. I'm going to assume it is for the moment. I wanted Ladd McConkey on my all boom team this week. So if you guys that don't watch our weekly content on Fridays, we do an all boom and all bust team. 7 players from each of us that will boom, 7 players that will bust. My co-host Nick Cap did have Ladd McConkey on his all boom team this week. We won't put the same player on our team. So he got first dibs, and it's half PPR. Thank you for that. So the first player I definitely want to get in your lineup here is Ladd McConkey. Baltimore Ravens defense surrenders the most fantasy points to wide receivers, an average of 36 points in games. McConkey has really become I don't know if league winner is the word, but he's had a lot of really solid games down the stretch. So I really do like McConkey. Let's get him in there. I'm going to say Josh Downs is the second one. I have Josh Downs on my all-boom team. The Lions allow the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers, an average of 30 points per game. They also allow the most points to slot wide receivers, and Josh Downs does play the majority of his snaps from the slot. Josh Downs has been the most productive Colts wide receiver this season. He has double-digit fantasy points in 8 out of 10 games. He averages 14.7 points per game. He's the wide receiver 16 on the season, and just last week he had 19.4 fantasy points with Anthony Richardson last week. So I like Downs and I like McConkey. So I'm between Juwan Jennings and Eckler here. I don't want to start Thielen. I actually have Juwan Jennings in a league, and I'm concerned about him, so I'm actually benching him. I would start Eckler here. He does get a lot of PPR work and a good chunk of checkdowns from Jaden Daniels. They're facing the Cowboys, who at this point have one of the worst defenses in the league. I just read the stats for the let's see here. Against he's kind of a running back and he's kind of a receiver. So the Cowboys allow the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs. And I know Eckler's a running back. He does, do a lot on the ground. And as for in the past, they allow about the 12th most fantasy points to receivers. So I would go with Eckler, McConkey, and Josh Downs. From Jelly of the Month, 8-3 PPR, lost Godwin and probably last week, Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt is going to play this week, and Pacheco is out. So you could still use Hunt another week. I'm doing that. Can flex a Pacheco back. So it's a trade question. Trade Jaden Daniels. Sorry, guys. It's tough to speak as normally I have my co-host with me to bounce off. So it's a lot of words to get out here. So trade Jaden Daniels, who's a round 10 keeper, and Roshan to 5 to 6 teams with 7 guys on bye for his T. Higgins. Other quarterback is Kyler. How badly do you need a receiver? Who's in your receiver room here? Let me ask that. Get back to me in the comments. Let me know who your receiver room is. I just traded for T. Higgins. I like T. Higgins, but Jaden Daniels has been exceptional. I think I'm okay with trading him in this sense. But I would like to know who your receivers are. From Corey Jackson, Hunter Henry going up against the Dolphins and Austin Eckler in the flex this week. So let's go. Or do I play Douglas or Singletary over them? I would not want to play Singletary, so let's get him out of the question. If you could only play one, I would rank them Eckler, Henry, and Douglas. I actually have to play Douglas in a league, and I'm not thrilled about it. The Dolphins have a really tough secondary. Man, I might try to get Douglas out of my lineup before the show ends. But the Dolphins allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points to receivers, an average of 21.8 per game. I'd be concerned about playing Douglas. So I would rank them Eckler, Henry, and then Douglas, but I would get Eckler in there. From Deshaun, PPR, start at my 2 flex spots. Devin Singletary, Joshua Palmer, Luke Shoemaker, and Kareem Hunt. Let's get Kareem Hunt in there, facing off against the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers allow the most fantasy points to running backs, an average of, let me just pull that up, an average of 28.3 points per game to the running back position. Kareem Hunt has delivered for most of his starts, 13 plus fantasy points in 5 out of 6 games this season. And the Panthers, I believe, have also allowed 17 plus fantasy points to the 8 or 9 different backs this season. So let's get Hunt in there. Why is everybody over Singletary? Am I missing? Tell me in the chat, guys. Am I missing an injury? Why are we all over Singletary today? Let me know in the comments, guys, if I'm missing something as to why people are all over Singletary today. I don't want to play Shoemaker. I've mentioned that once or twice. I don't want to play any Cowboy not named CeeDee Lamb, actually, so that's a blanket statement. I think I would play Joshua Palmer here, and here's why. Joshua Palmer is facing the Ravens, who allow the most fantasy points to wide receivers, an average of 36 points per game. Justin Herbert also has been exceptional lately. Herbert has 19 plus fantasy points over his last 4 games. He's been the QB6. The Ravens have allowed 17 plus fantasy points to 7 different quarterbacks. And the Ravens also allow the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks as well. So the receivers are going to get theirs, and so will Herbert. The over-under is also the highest of the week, set at 50.5. So I'm going to go with Palmer and Kareem Hunt. So Joe says Tracy's still healthy. Need a big game for him today. Yeah, I don't get the Singletary questions. I'm happy to help you guys out, but I don't think Singletary is going to see the field as much now that Tracy's really broken into that offense. From Garrett A. Veal, first name is flipping my mind, but I do have him in a league, or Joshua Palmer. I just want to look at the game log here. And again, normally I have my co-host on and we can bounce off each other. One of us can research, one of us can bounce over and talk. But since he is out sick today, it is just me. So bear with me while I'm researching. So, okay. I'm looking at Devon Veal. He has double-digit fantasy points in each of his last 2 games. He has 4 plus targets in each of his last 2 games. He has 1 touchdown. Facing the Raiders defense. Now, Palmer has the better matchup. The Raiders are actually decent against the pass. They allow the 7th fewest points to fantasy wide receivers. I think I would go with Palmer here just because of the matchup. Monday Night Football, highest over-under of the week. The Ravens defense allows the most fantasy points to wide receivers, an average of 36. Herbert's stats just keep trickling up as the weeks go on. They finally letting him throw the ball a bit more. I think I would go with Palmer here based off the matchup. All right, from Jelly of the Month, you have Neighbors, A.J. Brown, Downs, Waddle, Pearsall, rest of the bench, handcuffed running back. I don't think I would trade Jaden Daniels for T. Higgins. It sounds like you might need a running back. I don't know who your backs are, but if you're giddy to get Daniels off your team, maybe target a running back. I think your receivers are fine here. I mean, Neighbors and A.J. Brown will play every week, and you're gonna flex Downs or Waddle. So I probably would not deal Jaden Daniels to get T. Higgins, especially because you would lose a week of Higgins today. All right. Corey says, I think we are just curious at this point if he's even worthy on a roster after injury. Tracy's been completely taken over. Yeah, I would probably drop Devin Singletary. I don't keep a lot of running back handcuffs on my roster, and the ones that I do keep on my roster are like the 49ers backup or something like that, like a team that runs the ball a lot. The Giants don't score a lot of points. They're bottom 10 in points per game. They don't score a lot of touchdowns. And now that Daniel Jones isn't starting, they're going to score even less points. So I wouldn't want the backup running back on the Giants. Even if he did start, I mean, he might get some PPR work, but if I had to rank the top 10 handcuffs, like Singletary would not be in there. From Dale, thanks for holding it down solo this morning. I hope our brother gets well soon. I hope so too. It's nothing bad. He might be the flu, might be, a really bad cold, a lot of stuff going around. But yeah, I mean, I hope the best for him. Like if you can't speak, you can't do a show like this. And I think his throat was bothering him a little bit. So I'm holding it down. I do my Darth Vader mug. I have my tea in it to kind of soothe my throat a little bit. I was at Billy Joel last night, so I was singing for 2 hours. I was not singing on the stage, but I was singing along with Billy for 2 hours. So my throat is a little bit shot as well, but we're going to do the best that we can today. So just bear with me as I'm rattling through questions and stuff. All right, Corey, do I dump Singletary to get Trey Benson from waivers? Yes, I like Trey Benson a lot. He's a rookie. The Cardinals do like to run the ball, and James Conner's old. So if Conner does get banged up a little bit and misses a game or two, Benson's going to come in immediately and could even take over that backfield, kind of like we've seen a little bit from Bucky Irving, although he hasn't totally taken over the backfield. But we've seen a higher snap share from Trey Benson over the last few weeks. I would definitely rather hold Benson than Singletary. From TT Warrior, I have no choice. I have Disley, Laporta, and Hunter Henry, and then I have to cut one for a kicker. I would cut Disley. Yeah, I would cut Disley. You're not going to cut Laporta, obviously. And Hunter Henry's working with the rookie over there. And rookie quarterbacks love to target the tight ends. Hunter Henry's been a good waiver pickup. I think he's still within the top 10 tight ends on the season. I'm going to check that for you, though. He was within the top 5, but then I think he dropped out. Hunter Henry is your tight end 9 on the season. Hunter Henry has 4 double-digit games in his last 6. And then if we're looking at Will Disley, he did have 18 fantasy points last week, but he's only cracked double digits twice this season through 10 games. So I would cut Disley if you have to cut one. Thanks, like and subscribe. Appreciate you. If you guys are watching the show live and do enjoy it, make sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel. We do a live show every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. It's normally me and my co-host, Nick Cap. He is out sick today, so I'm kind of holding down the fort, but normally it is both of us, and you have 2 opinions to kind of bounce your decisions off of. We also do 2 shows during the week that are pre-recorded, available on Tuesdays and Thursdays/Fridays, whichever day we drop it on. And you can find our shows on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, or if you'd rather listen to an audio streaming platform, audio podcast, I should say, Spotify, Google Podcast, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast, you could kind of support us. And we're on social media as well. Only other question is Cade Otton or pick up and stream Jonnu Smith. So here's the thing. I have Cade Otton on my all bust team for this week, strictly because of the matchup. The Giants defense is not the best. They do have a pretty good front 7 and do get a lot of sacks, but they're good against the tight end. They allow the fewest fantasy points to tight ends, only an average of 5.2. However, that is the only negative I could say on Cade Otton. He has over 8.5 fantasy points in each of his last 5 matchups. And I know 8.5 is not a crazy number, but that's a tight end you picked up off the waiver wire. In 3 of his last 5 matchups, he's 18-plus fantasy points. Now, I believe most of that was without both Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, but he does have a good connection with Baker Mayfield. He is going to be the number 2 option for Baker the rest of the season going forward. So I would not drop Otton. I can't stress it enough. You cannot drop him. As for Jonnu Smith, a lot of people seem to really have come around to him. These are his last 5 games: 22, 6, 9.6, 7.5, and 28.1. Although the matchup is bad, I would still rather play on. The Bucs have been top 3/top 5 in yards and points scored per game the entirety of the year. I don't see that changing. Even though the matchup is bad, I would rather play Otton from the upside. Billy is a great concert. I could talk Billy all day with you guys. If he's in your town, I highly, highly, highly recommend going to see him. It's my 3rd concert of the year seeing Billy. I've gotten to hear a bunch of different songs. So, yeah, I can't recommend him enough. From Juan Pena Jr., hope I pronounced everything right. Who for my wide receiver 2 and flex? I got Justin Jefferson as wide receiver 1. That's great. And then the bench is Juwan Jennings, Ramondre Stevenson, Josh Downs, Xavier Worthy, Ricky Pearsall, Nick Westbrook-Ikine, or Jacoby Myers. My tight end is Kittle. Normally, I'd actually like to start Juwan Jennings, but with Brandon Allen starting at quarterback and you do have Kittle in there, I don't want to start another 49er. So for your receiver, let's start Josh Downs. Josh Downs is on my all-boom team this week, and here's why. Josh Downs is facing the Lions, who allow the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers, an average of 30 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. They also allow the most fantasy points to slot wide receivers. Josh Downs plays a majority of his snaps in the slot. Josh Downs has been the most productive Colts wide receiver this season. He's basically done what we expected Michael Pittman to do. He has double-digit fantasy points in 8 out of 10 games. That's consistency. He has a 14.7 average per game. He's the wide receiver 16 on the season with a 19.4 score with Anthony Richardson last week. I also see the Colts being down in this game. They will have to throw the ball a lot more. The Lions are the best offense in the league at the moment. They're going to score a lot of points. So I would love to get Josh Downs in there. I think that's a slam dunk play. And then for your flex, let's go with Ramondre Stevenson because I also have him on my all boom team. And for you guys that don't listen to our weekly shows, that's okay. I'll explain it. Me and my co-host Nick each do an all boom and an all bust team. 7 players we think are going to boom, 7 players we think are going to bust. We each have different teams. So I have Ramondre Stevenson on my all boom team facing the Dolphins, who allow the 9th most fantasy points to running backs this season, an average of 21.6. 6 backs have scored 14 plus fantasy points against the Dolphins this season. Stevenson had 15.2 fantasy points in week 5 against this Miami Dolphins defense. And last year he averaged 11 fantasy points within 2 games against the Dolphins. So I would play Josh Downs as your wide receiver 2 and Ramondre Stevenson in your flex. You also ask, should I drop anybody on my bench for Xavier Worthy? The options are Nick Westbrook, Akine, or Ricky Pearsall. The bench is Jacoby Myers, Darnell Mooney, Taysom Hill, Valdez Scantling, Juwan Jennings, and the tight end is Kittle. I would be okay with you either dropping Westbrook, Akine, or Ricky Pearsall. I'm not as high on Pearsall as other people are. The offense is loaded. You have McCaffrey, you have Juwan Jennings, you have Debo, you have Kittle. I don't see where you'd ever actually start Ricky Pearsall, so I'd be okay with dropping Pearsall for Xavier Worthy. I don't know when or if you'd start Worthy, but I'm okay with that swap. From Dale, I started Najee and the Steelers defense in PPR for this team. So what's your score? Let's start with that. For this team, I have Tyreek Hill and DJ starting. I'm assuming it's DJ Moore. So Tyreek Hill and DJ Moore. Should I keep Neighbors in the flex, or is Eckler or Dowdle a better flex considering the quarterback change in New York? So what is your score at the moment? What's your projection, I should say? Are you projected to win or are you projected to lose? Let me ask that question. Dowdle cannot start anywhere at the moment, and maybe I'll be wrong, but I don't think the Cowboys offense will move the ball at all unless they sign Daniel Jones or Aaron Rodgers. The Cowboys are dead to me. You could start CeeDee Lamb, and that's it. Any question you guys ask on the show about a Cowboy player besides CeeDee Lamb, I'm telling you to bench him or maybe even drop him. Because I don't want to be, be a little sore here, but I was facing my brother Joe in fantasy last week, and Joe had Rico Dowdle on Monday Night Football. I needed like 5.5 fantasy points, and he didn't get it. Dowdle's not going to get enough workload, so Dowdle can't be in these questions. He might be droppable at this point. So you said to win. You're projected to win. Okay, by how much? So I'm okay with Neighbors in the flex here. I have Neighbors on the all boom team. I am worried about the quarterback change, but the Bucs allow the 6th most fantasy points to wide receivers, an average of 30.7 per game. The Bucs will be playing from the Giants will be playing from behind. The Giants will be playing from behind as the Bucs will probably be up in this game. So it's more work for Neighbors. Neighbors also has double-digit fantasy points in 7 out of 8 games this season. I do like Eckler's matchup, but I would still rather start the talent of Malik Neighbors. Now, I might consider benching DJ Moore. They have a good matchup, but the Vikings defense are good. I'm going to look at DJ Moore's numbers for you real quick because I would rather start Neighbors over DJ Moore at the moment. And I'm between if I'd rather start Eckler or DJ Moore. So DJ Moore's last 5 games, 6, 5.4, 7.3, 5.7, and 13.7. Not a lot of ceiling there. Let me look at Eckler's last 4 or 5 games. So let me find him real quick. Again, normally one of us is researching and the other one's talking. So you'll have to bear with me a minute while I scroll and find Eckler's last few games. I do use Fantasy Pros. We both will have our Fantasy Pros tabs open. Eckler's last 5, 10.8, 4, 7.8, 17.3, 18.1, and 17.6. Eckler's over 15 fantasy points in 3 consecutive games. I would bench DJ Moore, and I'll put Eckler in your flex, and then Neighbors as your wide receiver too. Patrick Hodgins, 1 PPR. Marvin Harrison or Jamison Williams. Also, is Pearsall worth keeping rest of season? I would keep him on your roster for now, but I don't see when you ever start him. The 49ers offense already has Debo and Juwan Jennings and Kittle and McCaffrey. So he's the 5th option on that team. I don't know when you comfortably start him. 1 point PPR, Marvin Harrison or Jamison Williams. I would play Marvin Harrison. My Seahawks defense, and I'll flash my shirt here. They wrote me off. I ain't right back. Gino, big win last week. Shout out to him. But my Seahawks defense is a little bit like Swiss cheese, especially in the secondary. Harrison's been up and down, but I think this is a week that we could play him. So I'll get Marvin Harrison in there. From Mark Folkman, since I lost Purdy, struggling to decide between Anthony Richardson, Drake May, or Matt Stafford. Thank you. Good question. All right, let me think about this one for a minute. I like Stafford a lot on the season, but the Eagles' defense have been great. The Eagles' defense at the moment allow the 5th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, an average of 13.8. They allow the 6th fewest points to receivers, an average of 22.5. They allow the 3rd lowest fantasy points to tight ends at 6.8. So I do think there could be a high-scoring game on Sunday Night Football, but the Eagles defense has been pretty good. So that does worry me a little bit with Stafford. Drake May is going up against the Dolphins, who are good against wide receivers, but May has been really good. I want to pull up May's numbers here. Again, I'm scrolling on Fantasy Pro, so give me a minute as I'm forming an opinion and attempting to help here. Drake May in his last 6, 21.5, 20.8, 11.5, 17.7, 12.8, and 19. And then there's AR-15, who's just the ultimate wild card when it comes to fantasy football. He did have 28.1 last week against a good Jets defense. I'm going to tell you to play Anthony Richardson, and here's why. The Lions score a lot of points, and Anthony Richardson will have to make up for that by throwing the ball on a bad Lions secondary who will allow the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers. I think they'll be down in this game, which will help Anthony Richardson out. He still has the rushing upside and still could get you in the end zone. I would play Anthony Richardson. I think he's your high ceiling, low floor. I actually think Drake May is your safest play here, but I would play Richardson. Great question. From Deshaun, PPR, who do I put at running back 2 in my 2 flex spots? Tyrone Tracy, James Conner, Kareem Hunt, Cortland Sutton, Javonte Williams, Michael Pittman. So my first choice here for running back is going to be Kareem Hunt, facing the Panthers defense, who allow the most fantasy points to running backs, an average of 25.7. Kareem Hunt has 13 plus fantasy points in 5 out of 6 games he's played this season. I would lock in Hunt there. And then you're looking at 2 flex spots. Sutton... Is he facing the Raiders? I think he's facing the Raiders. He is facing the Raiders. And I'm pretty high on Sutton. But I want to look at his numbers. Again, I'm looking at a lot of numbers here, guys. So bear with me as I'm scrolling. So Cortland Sutton, over his last, let's go last 5 or 6 games. Let's go last 4, 17.1, 23.3, 19 of 14.8. Let's put Cortland Sutton in there. He's been very reliable. And then I think I want to lean James Conner. The Seahawks defense, again, isn't great. And the Cardinals do use Conner a lot. So James Conner's last 4, 17.2, 14.9, 14.9, 22.3. So let's do running back 2 is going to be Kareem Hunt. Flexes are going to be Conner and Cortland Sutton. Emil, I think it's Emil. If I'm wrong, please let me know. From Emil. With Aaron Rodgers getting benched, someone offered me Rachaad White for my Garrett Wilson thoughts. Being a Garrett Wilson owner is so tough right now. I wouldn't want to trade him for Rachaad White because he's just too talented. And Rodgers is not benched yet, but it is looking like that will happen. I would try to get something more for Garrett Wilson. He's too talented. Rachaad White's in a committee situation. I know he does get a good chunk of PPR workload. I know that Godwin's out, so that helps him as well. But Garrett Wilson's a guy that you drafted with your top 10 picks, and he's produced pretty well. He's your wide receiver 5 on the season right now. His last 2 games are duds, only 9.1 and 5.8. But previously before that, he had 4 consecutive games in double digits, 3 out of 4 over 15 in a 5-game stretch. There were 5 consecutive games with double digits, 3 out of 5 are over 20. I think Garrett Wilson's too talented. I think you could get a better offer for Garrett Wilson than Rachaad White. From Jay, do I flex Austin Eckler or Tony Pollard this week? Good question, because I'm a big Pollard truther. Who do the Titans have? Is it the Texans? I think it's the Texans. It is the Texans. Okay. Is this PPR, my friend? Let me know if this is PPR, because that might influence my decision. The Texans are pretty tough against backs. They allow the sixth fewest fantasy points to backs. Man, but I really do like Pollard, but Eckler does have the better matchup. I want to see what Pollard's done over his last 3 or 4. I think he had a dud last week. Yeah, Pollard at 18.4 a couple weeks ago, but hasn't cracked over 15 since. I would start the upset of Austin Eckler. He has 15 plus fantasy points in 3 consecutive games, facing a terrible Cowboys defense who allow the 4th most fantasy points to running backs, I think. Third. Cowboys allow the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs. So I would start Austin Eckler this week, even though I do really like Pollard rest of the season. He has an easy playoff schedule. From John Caldwell, 4-7, still in the bubble. I'm right there with you, buddy, in one of my leagues. Double flex PPR. Play Hockenson, even though I'm playing Kelsey, or Coker, or look to waivers. Waivers are Butte, Noah Brown, Jalen Tolbert, or Broncos receiver Vele, or Il Jordan. Yeah, let's flex Hockenson, and then we need to play one more. I don't really want to play Coker. I don't want to play Tolbert. I've been keeping my eye on Noah Brown. I would play Noah Brown or Devon Vele. I'm not sure which one I like more. They're both dart throws. I have to make that dart throw as well. I'm going to tinker a little bit this morning. I would go with Noah Brown, because I think the Commanders' offense will score more points. From Willis Jones, 5,100 left and need a wide receiver. I'm assuming this is daily fantasy. I don't play a ton of daily fantasy. But what is Josh Downs' value? I mean, are you just trying to get one wide receiver in there? Are you looking for a good value? I really like Josh Downs this week, and I wonder what his value is. So give me a couple names you're considering, or let me know what you're looking for, and I could try to help you out with that. From Nick, pick 2, CeeDee Lamb, Josh Jacobs, and Jonathan Taylor. Let's go with CeeDee Lamb. He should still be locked in your lineups. He's still CeeDee Lamb. And then both of your running backs have tough matchups, but I'm going to go with Josh Jacobs here. Jacobs last week had like 25 fantasy points or something like that. And Jonathan Taylor has a really tough matchup against the Lions. I don't like the way that they're using Taylor right now. He's not getting a lot of PPR workload. Bad matchup and not getting the workload. I'm actually considering benching Taylor in the leagues I have him as well for other players. So I would go with Lamb and Josh Jacobs. Half PPR. Also, is Jameson Williams worth a consideration for his ceiling? Yes, of course, he's worth a consideration. I'm 5-6. Then wide receivers are Lamb, AJ Brown, and Puka in my dynasty league. I would not start Jameson Williams over either of those 3 guys, if that's the question. If you had another flex spot, I would get him in there. But if you don't, then that's what I'd do. Half PPR, J.K. Dobbins or Bucky Irving. Let's go with J.K. Dobbins. He had like 20 plus fantasy points last week to get 2 touchdowns. He's still kind of the heartbeat of that offense, and that should be a high scoring game. Tight end, Goddard or Hunter Henry. You're in luck. Dallas Goedert is on my all boom team. The Rams allow the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends, an average of 11.9 per game. 5 tight ends have scored double digits against the Rams since week 5. Goddard has double digits in each of his 2 games coming off the injury. It's also the 3rd highest over-under of the week, sitting at 48.5. And Devontae Smith is out. I'm actually flexing Dallas Goedert in the league that I lost Devontae Smith in. So I think Goddard will have a big game. All right, keep the questions rolling, people. This is the Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast live show for Week 12. We do a live show every single week, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, available on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Normally, my co-host is joining me. He's out sick today, and that's okay. But he will be back next week for that live show. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Really would appreciate that. Drop a like on this video as well. We also give you two shows during the week that are pre-recorded. Those shows go up on our YouTube channel in an audio and video format, and also goes on our audio streaming platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Anchor, anywhere where you get your podcast. Please make sure you're supporting the Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. Keep dropping those questions, guys. I'm going to go until the questions stop. Probably going to be an hour-long show, so another 25-ish minutes, but I'll keep going until the questions are done. From Dale, on this team, I'm wondering if there's a waiver pickup to consider because I have to run Waddle and Watson. Shaking my head. PPR, Demario Douglas, Butte, Bateman, Wanda Robinson, or any other receiver to possibly consider. I wouldn't play any of those receivers over Waddle and Watson this week. I would keep what you got. From Deshaun, Zay Flowers or Marvin Harrison. So Zay Flowers will be going up against the Chargers in a game that's projected to be the highest over-under of the week. I'm trying to see where the Chargers rank in terms of receivers. They're about middle of the pack. I think I want to play Marvin Harrison. I think it'll be a good game against the Seahawks today. I think the Cardinals will put up a lot of points. The Seahawks don't have a good defense. And they're coming off the bye too, so they're fresh. I'll play Marvin Harrison this week. From Austin Price, I also have Bucky Irving, but I'm noticing everyone is high on him out of nowhere. Is it just post-bye rookie bump, or am I missing something? So I've personally been high on Bucky Irving from before the season, and I wish I had drafted him more places. And here's why. Rachaad White scored a lot of fantasy points last year, but he was a very, very inefficient running back. The reason why he scored so many points is because there was no backup that was taking his reps. He was the only guy there, got a ton of PPR workload. He was the only guy, but he only averaged less than 3 yards per carry. And he was great last year, Rachaad White. Bucky Irving got glowing results in camp, in preseason. The coaching staff loved him, so I was all over him before the season. I'm not sure if he's going to totally overtake the one spot this year. I think they're going to run a two-headed monster like a couple other teams do. The bye week does help. They got healthy, and the offense also scored a lot of points, so that also helps as well. I think he's a great pick and player for like dynasty or keeper leagues, but in a redraft league, he's probably going to spend most of the time on your bench, but should not be dropped. John says, drop Deontay for Noah Brown. I wouldn't. Are you playing either one this week? I probably wouldn't. They traded for Deontay Johnson. They're still going to work him into the offense. Noah Brown hasn't had a ton of workload over there. I would keep Deontay Johnson on your team. Juwan Jennings or Jaden Reed, full PPR. I would play Jaden Reed. And if you guys listen to the show every week, then you know my thoughts on the Packers offense. They're a very good NFL offense, but in terms of fantasy, they're streaky and you never know who's going to get the ball. But I would play Jaden Reed. He seems to be one of, if not Jordan Love's favorite target. He does have double-digit fantasy points in 3, 4, 5, in 6 games this season. He almost cracked double digits last week, right at 9.8. I don't want to play Juwan Jennings this week. I'm a bit concerned about him with Brandon Allen playing quarterback. I actually think the Green Bay Packers defense is in play this week, so I would not play Jennings. From Papa Giorgio with an @ in his profile picture. We love our @ats here. Pick one, non-PPR. DeAndre Hopkins, Ladd McConkey, and Juwan Jennings. So it's non-PPR. We're looking for touchdown upside. I like Ladd McConkey a lot. I like the fact that he's facing the Baltimore Ravens, who allow the most fantasy points to wide receivers, an average of 36 points per game. Ladd McConkey over his, let me do standard scoring here just so I can give you accurate information. Normally I'm under PPR, so give me 1 minute. In standard scoring, Ladd's last 4 games are 23, 6, 5, and 12. It doesn't sound great, but it's tougher when it's not, PPR. Herbert's also come into his own over the last few weeks. He's 19 plus fantasy points in his last 4 games, in each of his last 4 games. The over-under is also the highest of the week at 50.5, so I would play Ladd McConkey. Start Quentin Johnson or Demario Douglas PPR. I would start Quentin Johnson for all the reasons I just listed for Ladd McConkey. Demario Douglas may also see Jalen Ramsey today. The Dolphins are good against wide receivers. They allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. I would start Johnston. I think I'm actually starting Johnson in a league over Jonathan Taylor. From Jonathan Santiago, start 1 between Ladd McConkey, Calvin Ridley, Juwan Jennings, full PPR. My co-host, Nick, if he was here, would probably say Ridley. I would probably lean McConkey, but he also has McConkey on his all-boom team. Let me look at Ridley's numbers over the last few weeks. So McConkey's numbers over the last 4 are 29, 11, 7, and 18. Calvin Ridley's last 4 are 22, 12, 25, and 9. I think I would rather have McConkey. I think it's going to be a higher scoring game. You get a player on Monday Night Football. Herbert's been great. I think I'd rather play McConkey, but if you wanted to play Ridley, I wouldn't fault you for it. If we have any new viewers in here, thank you for joining the Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast, available every single Sunday live, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications every time we go live or when we post videos throughout the week. 2 pre-recorded shows available on podcast platforms as well. Stanley says he has Quentin Johnston or DJ Moore. He needs help in PPR. I would start Quentin Johnston. The Ravens allow the most fantasy points to wide receivers, an average of 36 points per game. I've talked about McConkey a lot, so let me talk a little bit about Quentin Johnston, who, again, like I stated, I will be starting this week. So let me scroll down until I find Quentin Johnston on this Fantasy Pros list. So Quentin Johnston has over double-digit fantasy points in 5 out of 8 games this season, including his last 3 games coming off the injury. So he does have a good connection with Herbert. He's catching the ball this year. I would put Johnston. My depth is just very messed up in this league. First time playing a double flex. I would still keep Deontay over Noah Brown. I wouldn't want Noah Brown. Not over Deontay. From Dale Sullivan, Kyler Stroud, Drake May, Brandon Allen, Caleb Williams, or Goff, 2 quarterback. I do not want Brandon Allen, so get him out of there. Let's play Kyler against the Seahawks. And I want to see what all the numbers are here. I don't want to play Caleb, so I'm between Drake May, Stroud, and Goff. Let me look at the numbers for you. Jared Goff's numbers aren't good. Although the offense is explosive, he had 34 last week, had a great game last week, but his previous weeks were 15, 9, and 12. Stroud hasn't cracked 20 fantasy points since week 4. So I don't want to play Stroud, actually. Drake May has, in his last 6 games, he's over double digits in each of his 6 games and over 15 fantasy points in 4 of them. I think I'm kind of leaning towards Kyler and Drake May, but if you wanted to play Goff over Drake May, I wouldn't tell you not to. From Deshaun, start to Brock Bowers, JSN, Zay Flowers, and Jalen Waddle. Who's your tight end in this league that you have Bowers and another tight end? And is this PPR? I am leaning with Bowers and Zay Flowers. That rhymes. That's nice. Bowers has been your tight end 1 on the season. He only has 2 games under double-digit fantasy points. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games over 15. He's on a historic pace, and he's going to prove me right as to one of my hot takes this season, which is that he would break Mike Ditka's receiving record. So I would go with Bowers and then Zay Flowers, but I wonder who your tight end is. Hurts is versing the Rams defense. Hurts should be locked and loaded into your lineup. If your question is Hurts, Goff, or Kyler, I'd play Hurts. Hurts should be in your lineup every single week. All right, guys, no more questions at the moment. I'll run through a quick injury preview. Just talking about the biggest injuries of the week. And then, keep asking your questions and I'll keep answering your questions. Zay Flowers or Brock Bowers, I would play Bowers. He's been too consistent. You have Kelsey at tight end. I can't believe you haven't traded one of these guys. If your trade deadline hasn't passed, I'd try to trade Kelsey if you can. 16-man, start 2. Jacoby Myers, Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen, Xavier Worthy, and Tucker Kraft. Let's start Calvin Ridley. I just read off his stats a couple minutes ago. And then it gets really tough. I would like to start Myers, but he's on my all-bust team, facing the Broncos, who allow the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, an average of 21.1. He might get Surtain shadowing him. It's a low over-under. I really don't want to play Keenan. I really don't. I think I'd take the upside of Xavier Worthy. From Dylan Fink, it's game day. Yes, it is game day. Full PPR, different leagues. Let's go with your first question here. It's a one flex. J.K. Dobbins, Tank Dell, or DeAndre Hopkins. Let's go with J.K. Dobbins. He's been very, very consistent this season. I don't like Tank Dell's matchup at all. He's on my all-bust team, and Hopkins has not been productive or consistent. Next question, one flex with the upside. Westbrook, Akine, Shoemaker, or Veli. I'm never going to know how to pronounce this guy's name. Let's go with Westbrook Akine. I think he has a touchdown in 4 consecutive games. He's formed a nice connection over there with Will Levis, and I think they'll have to put up a good chunk of points to win that game. One quarterback, Baker Mayfield or Kyler Murray. It's a good question. I would start Baker. He scored a lot of points this season. I'm starting Baker in a league. Actually, 2 leagues I think I'm starting Baker in. He's a quarterback 5 on the season. He did have a stinker before the bye. But before that, he had over 18 plus fantasy points in 6 consecutive games. That's including a couple games without Mike Evans. He gets Mike Evans back this week. I would start Baker. And then one running back, Cam Akers, Amir Abdullah, Raheem Mostert, or the Gus Bus. Oof, I don't like those options. But I will start Mostert. They still use Mostert. He does get some red zone touches. I would rank them Mostert, Gus, Abdullah, and Akers. All right. No more questions at the moment. Again, if you guys haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are the Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. Normally it's me and my co-host. He's out sick today. Wish him the best. We give you guys a live show every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, available on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, answering all of your fantasy football questions. Then we give you 2 shows during the week that are pre-recorded, available on Tuesdays and Fridays. Those pre-recorded shows are uploaded to our YouTube channel in audio-video format, and also audio podcast platforms like Spotify, Google Podcast, Anchor. Anywhere where you get the podcast, you can find us, the Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. From Dale, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jalen Waddle, Quentin Johnston, Michael Pittman, and Romeo Doubs, PPR start 2. Let's start Marvin Harrison and Quentin Johnston. I like the fact that Quentin Johnston's going to be in a high-scoring game against the Ravens, highest over-under of the week. The Ravens allow the most fantasy points to wide receivers. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. is kind of due for a big game against my Seahawks. All right, some injuries to talk about here. Going kind of game by game, but kind of mentioning injuries. Isaiah Pacheco is out with an ankle injury, so Kareem Hunt should be locked and loaded in your lineups again. Hopefully you didn't drop him. Jonathan Brooks is questionable with a knee injury, but is projected to play, making a season debut. He'll be on a pitch count. Jalen Coker with a quad injury is questionable, expected to play. Vikings, Bears. DeAndre Swift with a groin is questionable. He's projected to play. Keenan Allen with an ankle is also projected to play. Yes, we do hope my co-host Nick Cap is better next week. He should be. Nothing serious. He's just kind of under the weather and can't really speak. Sinus throat. Can't speak. Can't really do an hour-long show. So, all right. Next game we have here: the Tennessee Titans. Tajay Spears is out with a concussion. Not that you were starting him, but it does help for Tony Pollard. Nothing for the Texans. Lions, Colts. Nothing here to mention. Patriots, Dolphins, couple of defensive players that are hurt, but nobody on offense that's really going to make or break the game. Bucks, Giants, Mike Evans with a hamstring is going to make his return after missing a couple weeks with a hamstring injury. Tristan Wirfs is doubtful, but that wouldn't change my opinion on any of the Bucks players. For the Giants, Malik Neighbors with a groin is questionable, but he is projected to play. I can't imagine it's serious if he's playing, especially when the Giants season is realistically over. From Dale, PPR, Kyren Williams, David Montgomery, Kareem Hunt, or Amir Abdullah. And we have to start 2. Let's get Hunt in there. Kareem Hunt is a very positive matchup against the Panthers, who allow the most fantasy points to running backs, an average of 25.7. Kyren has the worst matchup. Can we get one of these guys in your flex? I really don't want to bench Kyren. He does have the worst matchup of the 3. The Eagles are tough on everything right now. But Kyren's also your running back 9 on the season. I mean, he has double-digit fantasy points in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 out of 10 games. That's consistent. Montgomery's also really consistent, but he's kind of needs a touchdown to be consistent. So I think I would go with Kyron and Kareem Hunt, but I would like to get Monty in your lineup if we can. Next game I have here, the Cowboys at the Commanders. Everybody in the Cowboys is hurt. Don't play your Cowboys unless it's CeeDee Lamb. That's all I could say about that. As for the Commanders, Lattimore is out, so that's actually good for CeeDee Lamb and no other injuries to mention in that one. For the Broncos and the Raiders, Alexander Madison is doubtful, so Emil Abdullah will get the start because Zamir White is also doubtful, but it will be a low-scoring game, I think, and I'm not sure how many points Abdullah is going to get. That's your injury news for that one. The 49ers at the Green Bay Packers. Purdy is out with a shoulder injury that will affect your 49ers players. I would bench Jawan Jennings this week. For the Packers, Jair Alexander is out, so that actually does help Jennings, but I worry about Brandon Allen starting at quarterback. From DJ, 14-team, full PPR, need 2 wide receivers and a flex. Butte, Noah Brown, Slayton, Westbrook-Ikine, or grab Coker, Vile, or Trey Tucker off the waivers. Oof, this is tough, man. Let's go at Westbrook-Ikine, Noah Brown, and grab Vile off the waivers. I think that's what I would do. And if you had to drop one, I would drop Darius Slayton. I don't want the third wide receiver on the Giants. Okay. Arizona Cardinals at the Seahawks. No real injuries to mention in this one. Sunday Night Football. The Eagles at the Rams. Devontae Smith with a hamstring is out. That sucks for me. For the Rams, they are basically good to go. And then Monday Night Football, the Ravens at the Chargers. Hopefully, should be a good one. No real injuries to mention this one. Led McConkey is questionable with the shoulder, but I haven't seen anything stating that he won't play or isn't close to playing. From Craig Wayne, Amir Abdullah or Roshan Johnson. Is this PPR? If it's PPR, I'd want Amir Abdullah. If it's not PPR, I'd probably want Roshan Johnson because he does get a lot of the goal line work. Alrighty, guys. Get your last questions in now. I'm going to wrap up. I know I've gotten to a lot of your questions today, and I've kind of started to slow down as I was going through my preview. So if you do have any questions, ask them now as I'm wrapping up, giving you guys plugs. John Caldwell, drop Coker for Jalen Wright. Dolphins running back, handcuff for HN. I'm set for the playoffs in this league. Well, Mostert's the handcuff technically, so you'd be dropping Coker for the second handcuff, I'd say. I'm okay with it as long as you're never going to play Coker. I don't think you will play Coker, but the handcuff is actually Mostert, not Jalen Wright. All right, guys. If you enjoyed the show, hopefully you did. Drop a like on this video. We do a live show every single Sunday. It's normally me and my co-host. He is out sick today. If just joined and missed me saying that, we do a live show every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, available on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We do give you 2 shows during the week that are pre-recorded. They drop on Tuesdays and then Thursdays/Fridays. Everything goes up on our YouTube channel, Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit the little bell icon so you get notifications every time we go live or drop a new video. The podcasts are also uploaded to every audio streaming podcasting platform possible. If you'd rather listen in the car, maybe your drive to work, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. We would appreciate that. If you have any other fantasy football questions, find us on social media. PrimeTimeFFPod on Twitter, Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast on Instagram. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for supporting this week. We appreciate you guys. 2 more questions. You have Amir Abdullah as well. Okay. I'm going to get these last 2 questions in. If you guys have any other questions, drop them now right before I sign off. So 14-team, full PPR. I do want to get Abdullah in there now. So let's go Abdullah, Westbrook-Ikine, and either Noah Brown or Vili. I would lean Noah Brown, though. And then from Dale, for a flex, Amir Abdullah, Xavier Worthy, or Michael Pittman, half PPR. Pittman has not been productive this season, but he does have a good matchup against the Lions. I think I would lean Pittman or Abdullah. I would rank them Pittman very slightly, then Abdullah, then Worthy. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Best of luck in week 12. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. I think we're going to drop our shows this week on probably Monday and Wednesday with Thanksgiving coming up. And then we'll talk to you guys again on the live next Sunday. So have a great holiday, guys, if you're celebrating. One more question. Let's get to this last one, then we'll get out of here. DJ Moore, Javonte Williams, or Veely? DJ Moore is still your most talented player. And although the Vikings defense turned into the third most fantasy points, 2 wide receivers, and the Bears offense scares me, I would still play DJ Moore. All right, guys, signing off. Thank you for the questions. If you have any more, drop them on Twitter or Instagram. Talk to you guys on Tuesday.